Alvin and the Chipmunks, specifically the Saturday morning cartoon, was, in a word, a success. 8 seasons, 7 years, impressive for a show of its sort. Practically doubling the original cast with the creation of the Chipettes, the show was the turning point in Alvin's evolution from just a gimmicky novelty record to a full franchise. But what if I told you an episode, or rather a short animation, was aired only once on NBC via a broadcast signal intrusion? This film was simply known as Half Speed. I actually managed to dig up a VHS tape of the episode being recorded live, presumably to try and catch another broadcast. It was recorded in full, but had a few minor technical malfunctions, mostly from poor storage. For context, I work as a professional organizer, and I found the tape while helping an older couple clean out their attic. It was absolutely covered in dust and some sort of black mold-looking substance that came right off when I wiped it with my hand. The man and woman said I could have the tape because they had no use for it, because, as you probably know already, literally no one uses VHS tapes anymore. And it wasn't a tape of a movie or anything like that because it was unlabeled. I took it home and broke out an old media player my mom had given to me, which I kept around due to my massive collection of VHS tapes and DVDs. I put the tape in, kicked back, and saw what it had on it. I was curious, and I wasn't disappointed with what I found. It started off with an ad for Crystal Pepsi advertising a taste you've never seen before. This automatically dated the tape to 1992 to 1993, which was good to know from an archivist perspective, even if it wasn't really that important. I thought about trying to skip ahead, but decided against it as soon as I saw something almost melt through the blue haze of the ad, like a black, dripping sludge. The broadcast started off with recorded footage of someone walking around a trashed, abandoned house that was littered with garbage all over the floor. You could hear heavy, almost labored breathing as the cameraman looked around in the darkness. Their hands were clad in black gloves that almost resembled a doctor's. They raked through the filth before seeming to find what they were looking for. A light is shown on 2 vinyl records still in their sleeve. The album cover is that of Chipmunk Punk. The unknown cameraman then places the bottom disc on a record player before turning it on. A slow, sludgy guitar track begun to play, which I've attached here. Then, after a fade transition, it cut to an animated clip of a man cast in black and blue, resembling a more humanoid Simon. He sits facing the audience, a small candle illuminating his face. He looks both left and right. Then, we get a view of the other chipmunks sitting at the table. There was Alvin, who slumped over in his chair. None of them even looked vaguely like chipmunks at this point, instead more resembling people with pink noses and vaguely rodent-like ears. Alvin's skin was burnt, and his jaw seemed locked in an eternal scream. Smoldering ash could be seen laying across his body like he was a recently snuffed candle. His cap covered most of his face, but you could tell he was already gone. The camera swung right, and I could see Theodore, or at least what was left of him. He was out of it too, even with more life than Alvin. He was in an almost ecstatic state, looking straight up, smiling. His eyes were completely white, as if they rolled back into his head, or even possessed, if that makes sense. He suddenly fell forward with a loud thud, shaking the stark white table. The film cut back to Simon, visibly shaking and sobbing, with his head in his hands. He was paranoid, borderline neurotic. He suddenly looked back up towards the viewer, before a pair of white, bony hands crept out of the darkness and appeared to snuff him too. There was a loud, almost deafening scream as it faded back to whatever was supposed to air at that time. I mean, it was probably the most metal-looking thing I ever seen, but why? Why would you air it on TV, especially on a major channel? Just distribute the tapes like a civilized punk. I sat there, dumbfounded on my couch. I didn't really know how to feel about it. Soon I found myself humming a song I hadn't heard in ages. Color me your color, baby. Color me your car. Color me your color, darling. I know who you are. I sang quietly while doing dishes, mind completely blank. Call Me, originally by Blondie, but covered by the Chipmunks in 1980. The only difference was that I sang it at half speed. Okay, that was Half Speed, a Lost Chipmunk animation written by Sutinnit. Review time. Now, I just want to point this out before I give my final thoughts. I know I said in the community page that I would pause on narrations for a bit because I don't feel good. But I at least wanted to get something out as a way to make up for the lack of uploads. And I chose something that didn't require much voice acting. And what do you know? This story came out today. Now for my final thoughts. This story was fantastic. It was awesome. Like Cluster Shulk, the only reason I'm not going to be giving this a 10 out of 10 is because it has some slight grammatical and spelling errors. But I feel like that can be fixed on the author's own accord. As for the story in general, it was really cool. It had a very interesting idea going for it. And the best part, in my honest opinion, wasn't just how mysterious it all was, but the fact that it felt like an actual realistic occurrence. It felt very believable. Like an actual music video that would show up on MTV's music block. And this was meant to be a hijacking. So that would be pretty. That would be pretty frightening as a hijacking. Not gonna lie, especially considering the descriptions of the Chipmunks and their humanoid form, which is one of my favorite things about this story is their descriptions. Alvin looks burnt to a crisp. Theodore is catatonic. And Simon is just like worried. He doesn't know what the fuck's going on. If like the description of everything that's happening really makes you think. And I actually spoke to the author of this story, and he said that this was based off of a nightmare he had when he was sleeping about a show coming on at 4 in the morning that scared the fuck out of him. Which, in a way, makes this story even more believable, because it happened in your head, you know. Also, one thing I want to give credit for is that he managed to make an old cliche that usually pops up in lost episode stories work well. It's mainly the introduction where he's like, oh, I work as a professional organizer. I help clean out people's houses, basements, etc., etc. And this couple let me keep their tape, because they had no use for it and it was unlabeled, and I'm an archivist myself. See, that's a very sensible approach. And like I said, it adds to the believability factor. And this wasn't your standard tape with gore and blood and, oh, this gory episode of this show showed up in my basement for some reason. I don't know why. Don't ask me. Nah, it was just a basic recording of a TV. That's it. Just what was going on on TV at the time, in the 90s, early 90s. Another thing I want to point out, this story is also inspired by a fan-made Chipmunks album by the name of Chipmunks at 16 Speed. And basically, what goes on in that album is they take old covers, I think covers from Alvin and the Chipmunks themselves, and they're slowed down to, like the title says, half speed. And the song that you heard throughout the narration actually comes from that album. Anyways, enough chit chat. 9 out of 10. That was a fantastic story. The grammar and spelling, those can easily be fixed because those are pretty little. And they don't bother me. I'll let that slide, but I'm still going to have to dock a point for that. But anyways, like I said before, this is simply my personal opinion, and if you disagree with it, that's fine. We all have our opinions regarding these creepypastas. What did you think of this pasta? What would you do to improve upon it if you were the writer? And as always, I will see you all in the next narration. Take care. Bless.